Tanya Williams exhaled slowly as she navigated through the crowded airport terminal, her hand firmly holding her daughter Zoe's small fingers. The 6-year-old bounced with excitement beside her, pointing at everything that caught her eye. After 3 years of nonstop work, late nights, and countless sacrifices as a single mom climbing the corporate ladder at her marketing firm, Tanya had finally done it. She'd booked first-class tickets to Disney World as a surprise for Zoe's birthday. "Mom, are we really sitting in the big seats at the front?" Zoe asked for perhaps the 5th time that morning, her eyes wide with wonder. Tanya smiled down at her daughter, adjusting the Mickey Mouse backpack on Zoe's shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart. I promised you something special for your birthday, didn't I? We're going to have the comfy seats with extra snacks and everything." The terminal bustled with summer travelers, families corralling excited children, business people typing furiously on laptops, and airport staff directing the flow of human traffic. Tanya checked her watch. They were right on time, perfectly according to her carefully planned schedule. As a marketing executive, Tanya approached everything with meticulous attention to detail, and this vacation was no exception. "Gate B12, Tanya murmured, spotting their departure gate ahead. "Perfect. We've got about 40 minutes before boarding starts." As they approached the seating area, Tanya noticed the varied demographics of her fellow passengers. A pair of elderly white women chatted quietly while knitting. A South Asian family with 3 children organized snacks from a cooler bag. 2 young white businessmen in matching suits discussed quarterly reports. It was the typical mix of humanity you'd expect at an international airport. "Can we get a snack, Mom?" Zoe asked, pointing to a nearby kiosk selling overpriced airport food. "How about we wait for the first-class lounge?" Tanya suggested. "Remember I showed you the pictures? They have fresh cookies and all kinds of juices." Zoe's eyes lit up. "The fancy room. Yes, let's go there." Tanya approached the check-in counter with their boarding passes pulled up on her phone. She'd splurged on this trip using a combination of saved points, a work bonus, and months of careful budgeting. As a black woman who had worked her way up from an entry-level position, she'd learned early on to project confidence in spaces that weren't always welcoming. She stood tall in her casual but polished travel outfit, dark jeans, a cream blouse, and comfortable yet professional flats. "Good morning," she greeted the airline representative with a warm smile. "We have first-class tickets for Flight 1287 to Orlando." The representative, a middle-aged woman with a name tag reading Diane, smiled back. "Of course. May I see your boarding passes and IDs, please?" Tanya handed over both their documents. Diane processed them efficiently, explaining the boarding process and directing them toward the first-class lounge. "The lounge is just past security to your right. Boarding will begin in about 40 minutes, and you'll be in Group 1. Enjoy your flight." Zoe practically skipped alongside Tanya as they made their way through security. The process was surprisingly smooth, perhaps one of the perks of first-class travel, Tanya thought. She'd traveled for business before, but had always been careful, with company expenses usually flying economy. This was different. This was her gift to Zoe, but also to herself. A recognition of how far they'd come together. The first-class lounge was everything the airline's website had promised. Plush seating, complimentary refreshments, and a quiet atmosphere away from the general terminal chaos. Zoe immediately spotted the refreshment table and looked up at her mom with pleading eyes. "Go ahead, birthday girl," Tanya laughed. "Just remember we have lunch on the plane too." While Zoe carefully selected cookies and apple juice, Tanya checked her emails one last time. She'd promised herself to disconnect during this vacation. Really disconnect. But old habits died hard. Her team knew she was taking this time off, her first real vacation in years. They could handle things without her for a week. "Mom, they have chocolate and vanilla cookies," Zoe reported seriously, returning with a small plate loaded with treats. Tanya put her phone away. "Excellent research, Ms. Williams, very thorough." Zoe giggled at her mom's playful formality, a little game they often played. Tanya would speak to her daughter as if she were a colleague, and Zoe would respond in kind, mimicking her mother's professional tone. "Thank you, Ms. Williams," Zoe replied, straightening her posture and extending her pinky finger as she sipped her juice. The refreshments are most satisfactory. They spent the next 30 minutes in comfortable conversation, Zoe chattering about what rides she wanted to try first at the theme park, while Tanya soaked in the simple joy of seeing her daughter so happy. When the announcement for their flight came over the speaker, they gathered their things and headed to gate B12. The boarding area had filled up considerably since they'd first arrived. Tanya noticed how passengers naturally segregated themselves, those with priority boarding gathering near the gate, others hanging back. She approached the line forming for first-class boarding, holding Zoe's hand. "Look for B12 on your ticket. Then we look for seats 2A and 2B on the plane," she explained to Zoe, who nodded seriously, taking her role as travel assistant very seriously. As they neared the front of the line, Tanya observed the gate agent, a thin man with a pinched expression who seemed to be having a stressful day. His name tag read Charles Reston. He processed the passengers ahead of them with minimal interaction, a brief glance at boarding passes, a cursory, "Enjoy your flight," and then on to the next person. When it was finally their turn, Tanya stepped forward with a smile, presenting both boarding passes on her phone. "Good morning. Seats 2A and 2B, please." Charles glanced at her, then down at the boarding passes on her phone, then back at her. His eyes narrowed slightly. "First class?" Something in his tone made Tanya stand a little straighter. "Yes, that's right." He took her phone, examining the boarding passes with unusual scrutiny, scrolling back and forth between them. "There seems to be some kind of issue with your booking." Tanya blinked, confusion replacing her previously relaxed expression. "Issue? What kind of issue?" "The system is showing some kind of discrepancy," Charles replied, his voice lowered but not enough to prevent those immediately behind them from hearing. "It appears your tickets may have been incorrectly issued." Tanya felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the sensation she always got when someone was about to make her life unnecessarily difficult. She took a deep breath. "I purchased these tickets directly from the airline website 3 months ago. I received confirmation emails, and as you can see, we have assigned seats in first class." Behind them, a white couple with a young boy approximately Zoe's age waited their turn, the father checking his watch impatiently. "Let me check something," Charles said, typing rapidly into his computer. After a moment, he looked up with what seemed like satisfaction. "As I suspected, there's been a system error. We'll need to split your tickets." "Split our tickets?" Tanya repeated, keeping her voice level despite her rising frustration. "What exactly does that mean?" Charles sighed as if explaining something obvious to someone deliberately being difficult. "Your daughter can remain in first class, but we'll need to move you to economy. There's a seat available in row 23. Tanya stared at him in disbelief. "That makes absolutely no sense. I purchased 2 first-class tickets. My confirmation shows 2 first-class tickets. Why would my 6-year-old daughter sit in first class while I'm seated 20 rows behind her?" Zoe looked up at her mother, confusion and worry creasing her small forehead. "Mom, aren't we sitting together?" "Yes, we are," Tanya assured her firmly before turning back to Charles. "Please show me exactly where the system error is occurring." People in line behind them were beginning to notice the delay. Tanya could feel eyes on her back, hear the murmurs of impatience. Charles's expression hardened. "Ma'am, if you continue to be disruptive, I'll need to call security." The threat hung in the air between them. Tanya felt her heart rate accelerate, a familiar anger and helplessness threatening to overwhelm her. She'd experienced this before, being labeled disruptive or aggressive for simply standing her ground. "I am not being disruptive," she stated clearly. "I am asking for clarification about tickets I legally purchased. How is that disruptive?" The gate agent turned to the white family behind them. "Sir, ma'am, if you'd like to go ahead while I sort this out." Tanya watched in stunned silence as the family presented their boarding passes, also first class, also with a child, and were processed without a second glance. No scrutiny, no system errors, no splitting of tickets. This was going to be a problem. Tanya felt her throat tighten as she watched the white family breeze past her toward the jetway. The father gave her an uncomfortable glance as they passed. Look, that said, he recognized the unfairness but wasn't about to get involved. She turned back to face Charles, who was now avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in his computer screen. I don't understand, Tanya said, keeping her voice steady despite the anger bubbling just beneath her calm exterior. You just let that family board without any issues. They also had a child. Why are our tickets being split? Charles sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that suggested Tanya was being unreasonable. Ma'am, as I explained, there's a system error with your booking. Specifically, what kind of system error would separate a mother from her 6-year-old daughter? Tanya pressed, conscious of Zoe's small hand tightening in hers. That makes no sense from a customer service standpoint, let alone a safety perspective. Oh, line was forming behind them now. Tanya could feel the weight of impatient stares on her back, the silent judgment of fellow travelers who just wanted to board their flight. She'd been here before, caught between standing up for herself and not wanting to create a scene. The familiar internal calculation: which would cost more, her dignity or her peace? Look, Charles said, lowering his voice but not his condescending tone. I'm offering you a solution. Your daughter can enjoy first class and you'll only be a few rows back. 20 rows, Tanya corrected him. And she's 6 years old. She can't sit alone. Flight attendants can assist with unaccompanied minors, Charles replied dismissively. She is not an unaccompanied minor, Tanya said, struggling to keep her voice from rising. She's traveling with me, her mother, who purchased 2 first-class tickets specifically so we could sit together. Zoe tugged at her mother's hand. Mom, what's happening? Why can't we sit together? Her voice had that wobbly quality that meant tears weren't far behind. Tanya knelt down to Zoe's level, turning her back to Charles. It's okay, sweetheart. There's just a mix-up with our seats. Mom's going to fix it. When she stood and faced Charles again, she noticed something that made her breath catch. A woman standing a few people back in line had her phone out, angled in their direction. She was recording this interaction. For a split second, Tanya met the woman's eyes, and there was a flash of solidarity there. With renewed confidence, Tanya pulled out her own phone. I'm going to show you my original booking confirmation email, she said to Charles. It clearly shows 2 first-class tickets purchased 3 months ago. I also have the credit card statement showing the full first-class fare for 2 passengers. She opened her email and held the screen toward Charles, who barely glanced at it. The computer system shows otherwise, he said firmly, and I need to continue boarding the flight. Then I'd like to speak to your supervisor, Tanya requested, standing her ground. Charles's mouth twitched with annoyance. My supervisor will tell you the same thing, and now you're holding up the boarding process. I'm not trying to hold anything up. I'm trying to board the flight I paid for, in the seats I paid for, with my daughter. An older black man who had been observing from nearby stepped forward. Excuse me, he said to Charles. I couldn't help overhearing. I'm a frequent flyer with this airline. Platinum status for over 15 years. Is there a problem with this? Ladies' tickets? Charles's demeanor shifted slightly at the man's intervention. Sir, I'm handling this situation. It doesn't appear that way, the man replied calmly. He turned to Tanya. I've seen this before. Do you have the confirmation with your seat assignments? Tanya nodded gratefully and showed him her phone. The man looked at it and turned to Charles. These appear to be valid first-class bookings to me. What exactly is the system error you're referring to? Charles's face flushed. Sir, with all due respect, this doesn't concern you. Actually, it does, the man replied. As a longtime customer of this airline, I'm concerned about what appears to be discriminatory treatment. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Discriminatory. Tanya had been thinking it, but hearing someone else say it aloud made her heart race. Charles's expression hardened. I'm going to need to call security if you both continue to disrupt the boarding process. The threat of security. Again. Tanya felt a cold wash of fear. As a black woman, she knew all too well how quickly situations involving security could escalate. how easily she could be painted as the aggressor. She looked down at Zoe, whose eyes were wide with confusion and fear. At that moment, another airline employee approached, a woman with a more senior-looking uniform and a name badge that read, Supervisor, Priya Kumar. What seems to be the problem here? Priya asked, looking between Charles and the growing crowd of onlookers. Charles immediately straightened. Just a ticketing issue I'm resolving. The man who had stepped in to help Tanya spoke up. This woman and her daughter have valid first-class tickets, but your gate agent is trying to separate them by moving the mother to economy. Priya turned to Tanya with a more professional demeanor. May I see your booking, please? Tanya handed over her phone once more, showing the confirmation emails and receipt. Priya studied them carefully, then looked at Charles's screen. I don't see any system error here, Charles, she said after a moment. The bookings are clearly for seats 2A and 2B, both first class. Charles's face reddened. But the passengers should board as ticketed, Priya interrupted firmly. She turned to Tanya with an apologetic smile. I'm very sorry for the confusion, ma'am. You and your daughter are confirmed in seats 2A and 2B. Please proceed to boarding. The relief that flooded through Tanya was so intense she felt momentarily lightheaded. She managed a polite thank you to Priya and a grateful nod to the man who had spoken up for her. Have a wonderful flight, Priya said, handing Tanya back her phone. As Tanya guided Zoe toward the jetway, she heard Charles whisper something to Priya, his voice tight with frustration. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. He was not happy about being overruled. Mom, is everything okay now? Zoe asked as they walked down the narrow corridor toward the plane. Yes, baby. We get to sit in our special seats together, just like we planned. But Tanya's mind was racing. What would have happened if the man hadn't stepped in? If the woman hadn't been recording? If the supervisor hadn't appeared? How many other travelers had faced similar treatment without witnesses or intervention? As they reached the plane door, a flight attendant greeted them with a warm smile. Welcome aboard. Seats 2A and 2B are just to your right. Tanya and Zoe settled into their spacious first-class seats, the wide leather feeling like a small victory. Zoe immediately began exploring all the features of her seat, pressing buttons and examining the menu with childlike wonder. Look, Mom. We get ice cream sundaes. Tanya smiled, but her hands were still shaking slightly as she fastened her seatbelt. The confrontation at the gate had left her rattled. She took several deep breaths, trying to center herself. This was supposed to be the beginning of their special vacation, not another battle against bias. As other first-class passengers boarded, Tanya noticed the woman who had been recording at the gate. She was being seated across the aisle, just one row behind them. Their eyes met, and the woman gave Tanya a subtle nod. Once settled, the woman leaned slightly toward Tanya. I'm Amara, she said quietly. I got most of that on video if you want it. Tanya felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you. I'm Tanya. I'm an attorney, Amara added in a low voice. What happened back there wasn't right. Before Tanya could respond, she noticed Charles stepping onto the plane. He walked through first class, checking overhead compartments with unnecessary force. When he reached Tanya's row, he paused, staring directly at her with undisguised resentment. The message was clear. He wasn't happy she had won this round. Tanya held his gaze steadily until he moved on. She wouldn't be intimidated. Not anymore. This was supposed to be a special trip for her daughter, and she wasn't going to let anyone ruin it. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard. As the plane began its preparations for takeoff, Tanya tried to push the gate incident from her mind. She turned to Zoe, who was already engrossed in the in-flight entertainment system. Are you excited, birthday girl? Zoe nodded enthusiastically. This is the best trip ever, Mom. Tanya smiled, determined that the incident at the gate would not define their vacation. But as the plane taxied toward the runway, she couldn't help but think about what had just happened and what might come next. The plane reached cruising altitude, and Tanya finally felt her shoulders relax slightly. The first-class cabin was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the engines and occasional soft conversation. Zoe had already made friends with the flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Beverly, who had brought her an extra packet of cookies, just because. "Mom, can I have the window seat for a little while?" Zoe whispered, though her idea of a whisper was still audible to nearby passengers. Tanya smiled. "Sure, sweetheart, let's switch." They carefully changed places, Zoe's face immediately pressing against the small oval window, watching clouds drift by beneath them. "It looks like cotton candy," Zoe observed dreamily. Despite the peaceful moment, Tanya couldn't fully shake the unsettling confrontation at the gate. Her mind kept replaying Charles's dismissive tone, the way he'd been ready to separate her from her child without hesitation, how quickly he'd threatened to call security. She'd experienced discrimination before, subtle glances in upscale stores, being mistaken for service staff at professional events despite her business attire, having to work twice as hard for the same recognition. But something about this incident felt different, maybe because it involved Zoe. A gentle tap on her shoulder interrupted her thoughts. It was Amara, the attorney, who had recorded the incident. "Sorry to disturb you," Amara said quietly, leaning across the aisle. "I just wanted to check if you're okay." Tanya nodded. "I'm fine, thank you. And thank you again for recording that. I'm still processing what happened." "I understand," Amara replied. "I've been in similar situations. That's why I started recording. These things happen so often, but without evidence." She trailed off, both women understanding the unspoken reality. "I'm trying not to let it ruin our trip," Tanya said, glancing at Zoe, who was still captivated by the view outside. "This is her first time flying first class. Her birthday present. She's adorable." Amara smiled. "How old?" 6 yesterday, Tanya said, her expression softening. "We're headed to Disney World." "Perfect birthday adventure," Amara agreed. Then, her voice lowered further. "Listen, I don't want to push, but what happened back there wasn't just poor customer service. It was textbook discrimination. I practice civil rights law, and I've seen this pattern before." Tanya sighed. "I know, but honestly, I'm just relieved. We made it on board together. Fighting these battles gets exhausting." "I understand completely," Amara nodded. "I only mention it because I saw the supervisor's reaction. She seemed genuinely surprised by what the gate agent was doing. That suggests this might be an individual problem, not necessarily a company-wide one. Sometimes in these situations, the company actually wants to know about problematic employees." Beverly approached with the drink cart, momentarily pausing their conversation. "What can I get for you, ladies?" "Apple juice for my daughter," Tanya said. "And I'll take sparkling water, please." "I'll have the same," Amara added. As Beverly prepared their drinks, Tanya noticed the older black man who had intervened at the gate was seated a few rows ahead. He caught her eye and gave a reassuring nod, which Tanya returned gratefully. Once Beverly moved on, Amara continued, her voice just above a whisper. "I've got the entire interaction recorded clearly. If you decide you want to do something about it, I'd be happy to share the video with you. No pressure either way." Tanya considered this. She'd always taught Zoe to stand up for herself, to know her worth. What message would she send by letting this incident slide? On the other hand, pursuing it meant extending the unpleasantness, potentially turning their vacation into something overshadowed by conflict. "I have a card in my bag," Amara added, sensing Tanya's hesitation. "Take it, think about it. No rush to decide anything now." "Thank you," Tanya said sincerely. "I appreciate that, truly." Their conversation was interrupted by a small commotion at the front of the cabin. Charles, the gate agent, was speaking with Beverly and another flight attendant. He gestured toward Tanya's row with barely concealed frustration, his voice just low enough that Tanya couldn't make out the words. Beverly's expression changed from professional politeness to something cooler as she listened to whatever Charles was saying. She nodded curtly, and Charles disappeared back toward the front of the plane. A moment later, Beverly approached Tanya. "Excuse me, Ms. Williams, could I speak with you for a moment?" Tanya felt a flutter of anxiety. "Is everything okay?" Perfectly fine, Beverly assured her with a warm smile that seemed deliberately emphasized. I just need to verify something about your return flight. Tanya gently touched Zoe's shoulder. I'll be right back, sweetie. Keep watching for interesting cloud shapes. Zoe nodded without turning from the window. I just saw one that looks like a dragon. Beverly led Tanya to the small galley area at the front of the first-class cabin, where they had a bit of privacy. Another flight attendant was preparing the meal service, but stepped away discreetly. I apologize for the confusion, Beverly began, her voice low. The gate agent just came to inform me that there might be an issue with your tickets, but I've checked the manifest myself, and everything is completely in order. Tanya felt her jaw tighten. He's still trying to cause problems. Beverly's professional expression slipped slightly, revealing a flash of disapproval. Let's just say this isn't the first time we've had concern about this particular employee. I want to assure you that your seats are confirmed, your booking is valid, and you and your daughter are exactly where you're supposed to be. The revelation that Charles had actually followed up, trying to cause trouble even after they'd boarded, sent a chill through Tanya. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Thank you for telling me, Tanya said quietly. I also want you to know, Beverly continued, her voice even lower, that several of us observed what happened at the gate. We've already discussed filing an internal report. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on all of us, and it's not what our airline stands for. The knot in Tanya's chest loosened slightly at Beverly's words. It was validating to hear someone in an official capacity acknowledge the wrongness of the situation. I appreciate that, Tanya said. Really? Now, Beverly's tone brightened as she gestured back toward the cabin. Let me know if there's anything special you or your daughter would like during the flight. It's her birthday trip, right? We might have a little surprise for her during meal service. Tanya smiled genuinely for what felt like the first time since the incident. That's very kind. Thank you. When Tanya returned to her seat, Zoe was busy, drawing on the kids' activity sheet Beverly had provided earlier. Everything okay, Mom? Zoe asked, looking up from her coloring. Everything's perfect, baby, Tanya assured her, stroking her daughter's hair gently. Amara caught Tanya's eye questioningly. Tanya gave her a subtle nod, as if to say, we'll talk later. For the next hour, Tanya tried to focus on the flight experience, helping Zoe pick a movie from the entertainment system and enjoying the first-class meal service. True to her word, Beverly arranged a special dessert for Zoe, a cookie decorated with chocolate to spell out happy birthday, and a little paper crown made from napkins. Zoe was delighted, proudly wearing her paper crown and thanking Beverly with a big grin. The other passengers smiled at the sweet scene, a few even wishing Zoe happy birthday. As the meal service wound down, Tanya noticed several passengers discreetly approaching Beverly or the other flight attendants, speaking in hushed tones while occasionally glancing in her direction. After one such conversation, Beverly brought a small stack of business cards to Tanya. Some of the other passengers wanted to give you these, she said quietly. They witnessed what happened at the gate and wanted to offer their contact information in case you need witnesses. Tanya accepted the cards, momentarily speechless. There were 5 of them, including one from the older black man who had spoken up for her. People saw what happened, Beverly added softly, and they didn't think it was right. After Beverly moved on, Tanya examined the cards. Attorneys, a university professor, a medical doctor, and a corporate executive, all people with credibility and social standing, all willing to stand as witnesses. That's quite a collection, Amara observed, noticing the cards in Tanya's hand. I wasn't expecting this, Tanya admitted. Unfortunately, what happened to you isn't rare, Amara said. But having this many people willing to speak up about it, that is rare and valuable. Tanya carefully tucked the cards into her purse, her mind working through the implications. The incident that had started as a personal humiliation was taking on a different dimension. This wasn't just about her and Zoe anymore. It was about a pattern of behavior that affected countless travelers who might not have had the support she'd received today. The flight attendants are filing an internal report, Tanya told Amara quietly. Apparently, this gate agent has a history. Amara nodded thoughtfully. That could be very significant. It establishes a pattern. As the plane began its initial descent toward Orlando, Tanya made a decision. She would document everything while it was still fresh in her mind. She would collect statements from willing witnesses. She would follow up with the airline's customer service, not to seek compensation or special treatment for herself, but to ensure accountability. She looked at Zoe, now dozing peacefully against her shoulder, the paper crown slightly askew on her head. This was about more than just their vacation. It was about the world Zoe would grow up in, and whether her mother had done everything possible to make it a little more fair. The captain announced their approach to Orlando International Airport. Tanya gently woke Zoe, helping her prepare for landing. "Are we there, Mom?" Zoe asked sleepily. "Almost, birthday girl. Our adventure is just beginning." And as the plane descended toward the Florida landscape, Tanya knew she was ready for whatever came next. She had truth on her side, evidence in her pocket and witnesses at her back. The gate agent's discrimination wouldn't go unchallenged. But first, Disney World awaited, and Tanya was determined that nothing would overshadow the joy of seeing Zoe's face when she first glimpsed Cinderella's castle. The Florida sun greeted Tanya and Zoe as they stepped out of Orlando International Airport, the humid air wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Zoe bounced on her toes, her excitement restored after the brief nap on the plane. Their first-class seats had meant they were among the first passengers to disembark, and Tanya was grateful for the small mercy of avoiding any further interaction with Charles. "Mom, look, that bus has Mickey ears." Zoe pointed at the Disney Resort shuttle waiting in the pickup area. "That's our ride." Tanya smiled, checking the resort confirmation on her phone. She'd splurged on the full Disney experience. Resort stay, meal plan, character breakfasts, the works. A year of overtime and careful saving had made this PI possible, and despite the airport incident, she was determined to make every moment magical for Zoe. As they waited for their luggage, Tanya felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Amara, rolling a sleek carry-on bag. "Heading to Disney too?" Tanya asked. Amara nodded. "Conference at the Grand Floridian, actually. Corporate law panel." She handed Tanya a business card. "My personal cell is on the back. If you decide to pursue anything about what happened at the gate, call me anytime." Tanya slipped the card into her purse alongside the others she'd collected on the plane. "Thank you, I'm still processing it all." "No pressure," Amara assured her. "But that recording isn't going anywhere." She knelt down to Zoe's level. "Have an amazing birthday trip, Princess." Zoe beamed. "Thank you. I'm going to meet Moana." After saying goodbye to Amara, Tanya and Zoe collected their luggage and boarded the Disney shuttle. As the bus pulled away from the airport, Tanya felt some of the tension from the flight begin to melt away. For the next week, their world would be castle spires, costumed characters, and the pure joy on Zoe's face. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of theme park adventures. They rode Space Mountain twice, Zoe just barely meeting the height requirement, got splashed on Splash Mountain, and collected autographs from a dozen different characters. Zoe wore her birthday button proudly, receiving special attention from cast members throughout the parks. The incident at the airport seemed like a distant cloud, unable to shadow the sunshine of their Disney days. On their 4th evening, exhausted but happy, they returned to their resort room. Zoe fell asleep almost immediately, still clutching the Moana doll Tanya had bought her after their character breakfast that morning. Tanya sat on the balcony of their room, sipping a cup of tea and scrolling through the hundreds of photos she'd taken. A notification popped up on her phone, a news alert with the headline, "Airline faces backlash after video of gate agents' discriminatory behavior goes viral." Tanya nearly dropped her phone. With trembling fingers, she tapped the link. The article featured a blurred screenshot from a video that was unmistakably from her encounter with Charles. According to the article, the video had been posted on social media yesterday and had already garnered over 2 million views. Oh my God. Tanya whispered to herself. She quickly opened her social media apps, searching for the video. It didn't take long to find. There it was, her back clearly visible as she stood at the gate with Zoe, Charles's dismissive expression perfectly captured, and then the intervention of the older passenger. The caption read, "Watch this black mother with valid first-class tickets nearly get separated from her 6-year-old daughter, while gate agent lets white families board without question. You're flying while black. Either discrimination." The video had been posted by a travel blogger who'd been at the gate, not by Amara, as Tanya had initially suspected. The comments section was overflowing with outrage, support, and sadly, some predictable attempts to justify Charles's behavior. Tanya set her phone down, her mind racing. She hadn't planned on the incident becoming public like this. She'd been thinking of filing a formal complaint with the airline, using the evidence and witness statements she'd collected, but handling it privately. Now it was out in the world, gaining momentum with every share and retweet. Her phone began to ring. An unknown number. Tanya hesitated, then answered. "Is this Tanya Williams?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Leah Chen from Customer Relations at Skyline Airlines. I'm calling regarding the incident at our gate in Chicago 3 days ago. First, I want to sincerely apologize for your experience." Tanya stepped further onto the balcony, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Zoe. "I appreciate that. How did you get my number?" "From our passenger records," Leah explained. "We've been trying to contact you since yesterday, when the incident was first brought to our attention through internal reports and, well, now the social media video." "I see," Tanya said carefully. "I should tell you that I wasn't the one who posted that video." "We understand that," Leah assured her. "And we want you to know that we take this situation extremely seriously. What happened was completely unacceptable and against everything Skyline stands for." The corporate language was familiar to Tanya from her own work in marketing. Damage Control 101. Still, Leah's tone seemed genuinely concerned. "The gate agent has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation," Leah continued. "But based on the video evidence and reports from our flight staff, it's clear that you and your daughter were treated in a discriminatory manner." Tanya closed her eyes, feeling a complex wave of emotions, validation, lingering anger, and a weary kind of relief. "Thank you for acknowledging that. We'd like to make this right," Leah said, "though we know nothing can truly make up for the experience. Would you be open to speaking further with our team when you return from your vacation? We don't want to interrupt your trip with your daughter." "I appreciate that consideration," Tanya said. "Yes, I'd be willing to talk after we return home." After ending the call, Tanya remained on the balcony, watching the distant fireworks explode over the Magic Kingdom. The situation was developing faster than she'd anticipated. Part of her had expected to fight for acknowledgement of what had happened, to push against denials and minimization. The video had changed that dynamic completely. She checked her email and found messages from 3 different news outlets requesting interviews. There was also an email from Beverly, the flight attendant, expressing support and confirming that she and 4 other crew members had filed formal reports about Charles's behavior. Tanya closed her email app and looked in on Zoe, still peacefully, asleep with her Moana doll. This vacation was about creating beautiful memories for her daughter, not about becoming the center of a viral news story. She decided the interviews and decisions could wait until they returned home. The next morning, Tanya was enjoying coffee on the balcony, while Zoe was still asleep when her phone rang again. This time it was Amara. "Have you seen it?" Amara asked without preamble. "The viral video?" "Yes," Tanya replied. "The airline called me yesterday." "Good," Amara said. "They're in damage control mode. I wasn't sure if you'd heard, but there's more. 2 other passengers have come forward with similar experiences with the same gate agent. Both black women, both with valid first-class tickets who were told there were system errors." Tanya sat up straighter. "Seriously?" "Yes. After the video went viral, they recognized him and shared their stories online. One incident was just last month. The pattern is unmistakable. The revelation sent a chill through Tanya. This wasn't just about her experience anymore. It was about a systematic practice of discrimination that had affected multiple travelers. "What do you think I should do?" Tanya asked. "That depends on what you want," Amara replied thoughtfully. "If you're looking for a quick resolution, the airline will probably offer compensation, apologies, maybe free tickets. They'll want this to go away quietly. And if I don't want it to go away quietly, then we could discuss legal options. Not just for compensation, but for structural changes. Employee training, anti-bias protocols, transparency in handling discrimination complaints. Real, measurable changes that would help ensure this doesn't happen to someone else." Tanya thought about Zoe, about the world her daughter was growing up in. "I don't want hush money," she said firmly. "I want accountability." "That's what I figured," Amara said, and Tanya could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm back in Chicago on Friday. Why don't we meet when you return from Disney? We can discuss options, no obligation." After hanging up, Tanya checked social media again. The video had now been viewed over 5 million times. Skyline Airlines had issued an official statement promising a full investigation and reaffirming their commitment to diversity and inclusion. The comments were flooded with people sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. Tanya closed the app just as Zoe stirred and sat up in bed, her curly hair wild from sleep. "Morning, Mom," she yawned. "Are we going to Animal Kingdom today?" "Yes, we are, birthday queen. We've got a safari adventure waiting for us." As Tanya helped Zoe get ready for the day, she made a decision. For now, the viral video, the airline's response, and the potential legal battle ahead would remain on the periphery. This precious time with her daughter wouldn't be overshadowed by what had happened at the gate. There would be time enough to fight for justice when they returned home. But fight she would. Not just for herself, but for every traveler who had been made to feel less than, who had swallowed the humiliation rather than risk escalation, who had taught their children the painful art of keeping quiet in the face of injustice. Some battles were worth fighting even when you'd rather be watching fireworks over Cinderella's castle. For now, though, there were Mickey-shaped waffles to eat and safari animals to spot. The rest would wait. The last day of their Disney vacation arrived too quickly. Tanya and Zoe spent it revisiting their favorite rides, buying last-minute souvenirs, and savoring their final character dinner. That evening, as they packed their suitcases in preparation for tomorrow's flight home, Zoe carefully wrapped her new snow globe in a t-shirt. "Mom, this was the best birthday ever," she declared, her voice solemn with the weight of her 6-year-old conviction. Tanya smiled, feeling a bittersweet pang. The vacation had been everything she'd hoped, magical, memorable, and filled with Zoe's laughter. She'd managed to keep the growing situation with the airline separate from their Disney experience, checking updates only when Zoe was asleep. "I'm so glad you loved it, sweetie," Tanya replied, zipping up Zoe's small suitcase decorated with princesses. "What was your favorite part?" Zoe thought seriously for a moment. "Meeting Moana, and riding Space Mountain with you, and the fireworks, and the ice cream, and..." Tanya laughed. "So basically everything?" "Everything except the plane ride here," Zoe said, her expression suddenly clouding. "That man at the airport was mean." The comment caught Tanya off guard. They hadn't discussed the incident during their vacation, and she'd assumed Zoe had forgotten about it amid all the Disney excitement. Children noticed more than adults gave them credit for. "Yes, he was," Tanya agreed carefully, sitting on the bed and patting the spot beside her. Zoe climbed up, leaning against her mother's side. "But remember how other people were kind? Like Beverly the flight attendant and the man who helped us?" Zoe nodded. "Why was that man so mean, though? We didn't do anything wrong." Tanya took a deep breath. She'd had versions of this conversation with Zoe before, age-appropriate discussions about unfairness in the world. But it never got easier. "Sometimes, people make unfair judgments based on how others look," she explained gently. "It's wrong, but it happens." The important thing is that we stood up for ourselves, right? And other people stood up for us too. Like when Andy K. wouldn't let Priya play soccer at recess because she's a girl, and you told me to tell the teacher? Exactly like that, Tanya said, impressed by her daughter's connection. And remember what happened after? The teacher made a new rule that everyone gets to play, Zoe recalled. So we should tell the airplane teacher about that mean man. Tanya smiled at Zoe's simplified understanding. The airline already knows, sweetie, and they're working to make sure he doesn't treat other people that way. Zoe seemed satisfied with this explanation, her attention already shifting back to her souvenir collection spread across the bed. Tanya watched her daughter arrange her treasures, marveling at how resilient children could be. The incident that had kept Tanya up at night was, to Zoe, simply a moment of unfairness that was being addressed, like the soccer situation at school. They flew home the next day, this time without incident. Their return flight was on a different airline, a decision Tanya had made when booking to ensure variety in their travel experience. Now she was especially grateful for that choice. Life resumed its normal rhythm once they returned to Chicago. Work for Tanya, first grade for Zoe, their usual routine of homework, playdates, and weekend activities. But beneath this normalcy, the situation with Skyline Airlines continued to unfold. 3 days after their return, Tanya sat in a downtown coffee shop across from Amara, whose professional demeanor in a crisp navy suit was a stark contrast to the casual vacation clothes Tanya had seen her in. The airline wants to schedule a meeting, Tanya explained, stirring her latte absently. Their legal department called yesterday. Amara nodded. That's no surprise given how much attention this has received. The video is up to 12 million views now, and those other women coming forward really changed the game. This isn't an isolated incident they can dismiss anymore. What do you think they'll offer? Tanya asked. The usual playbook, financial, compensation, free tickets, or airline miles, a formal apology, Amara replied. But you mentioned you want more than that. I do, Tanya confirmed. This isn't about money or perks. It's about making sure this doesn't keep happening. Amara smiled. That's why I'd like to represent you if you're comfortable with that. Pro bono, of course. This is exactly the kind of case that can push for real changes. They spent the next hour discussing strategy, potential demands for systemic changes, and what to expect from the meeting with the airline's legal team. By the time they parted, Tanya felt prepared and purposeful. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday, at Skyline's corporate headquarters. Tanya took a personal day from work, dropped Zoe at school with an extra tight hug, and met Amara in the sleek downtown office building lobby. Ready? Amara asked as they rode the elevator to the 37th floor. Tanya smoothed her blazer, the one she reserved for important client presentations. Ready? The conference room they were shown to had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. 4 people waited for them, 2 men and 2 women, all in business attire with expressions carefully calibrated to convey seriousness without revealing any specific emotion. Ms. Williams, thank you for coming, said one woman, stepping forward to shake Tanya's hand. I'm Patricia Okonkwo, Chief Legal Officer for Skyline. This is Michael Brennan, our VP of Customer Experience. Diane Fujita, Head of Diversity and Inclusion, and Robert Chen from our legal team. Tanya introduced herself and Amara, and everyone took seats around the polished conference table. Patricia spoke first. Before we begin, I want to personally apologize for your experience at our gate in Chicago. What happened was completely unacceptable and contrary to our values as a company. Tanya nodded, maintaining eye contact. I appreciate that, Patricia continued. We've conducted a thorough investigation into the incident. The gate agent in question, Charles Reston, has been terminated, effective immediately. That's a start, Amara commented. But as you're aware, terminating one employee doesn't address the systemic issues at play, especially given that 2 other passengers have come forward with similar experiences involving the same gate agent. Michael Brennan leaned forward. We understand that, which is why we've prepared a comprehensive response. He slid a folder across the table. We'd like to offer you compensation for the distress caused, complimentary first-class tickets for future travel, and platinum status in our frequent flyer program. Tanya didn't touch the folder. I'm not interested in compensation or special treatment for myself. Patricia and Michael exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't the response they'd expected. What are you looking for, Ms. Williams? Patricia asked carefully. Tanya met her gaze. Systemic change, accountability, transparency. She turned to Amara, who nodded encouragingly. We have some specific proposals, Amara said, opening her briefcase and distributing copies of a document to everyone present. Ms. Williams would like to see Skyline implement mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, conducted by external experts. She'd like a clear, accessible reporting system for passengers who experience discrimination. And she'd like Skyline to publish an annual report detailing incidents of bias and the actions taken in response. Robert Chen, the airline's lawyer, scanned the document with a frown. These are substantial demands. They're reasonable requests that would benefit all your passengers, not just Ms. Williams, Amara countered. Diane Fujita, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Actually, I think these are excellent suggestions. Everyone turned to look at her. As head of diversity and inclusion, I've been advocating for similar measures. This incident, unfortunate as it is, provides an opportunity to implement meaningful changes. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving from initial resistance to productive discussion of implementation details. By the end, Skyline had agreed to all of Tanya's proposals, with timelines and accountability measures in place. We'll need to prepare a formal agreement, Robert said, making notes. But I think we have the framework for a resolution that works, for everyone. As the meeting wrapped up, Patricia addressed Tanya directly. Ms. Williams, your approach to this situation is commendable. Many would have simply taken the compensation and walked away. The changes you've advocated for will make Skyline better for all our passengers. Tanya smiled. That was the goal. As Tanya and Amara left the building, stepping into the bright spring sunshine, Tanya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. You did good in there, Amara said, clearly impressed. Not many people would have turned down the easy payday for the harder road of systemic change. I kept thinking about what I teach Zoe, Tanya replied, that standing up for what's right isn't just about fixing things for yourself, it's about making things better for everyone. They parted ways, Amara heading back to her office and Tanya driving to pick up Zoe from school. As she waited in the pickup line, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Hello? Ms. Williams, this is Beverly Thompson, the flight attendant from your Chicago to Orlando flight a few weeks ago. Beverly, of course, how are you? I'm well, thank you. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to let you know what's happening here at Skyline. The company just announced mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, and they're creating a new passenger advocacy office. The rumor is that it's all because of what happened with you and your daughter. Tanya smiled. That's great to hear. The changes are happening faster than I expected. Faster than any of us expected, Beverly agreed. And there's something else you should know. After Charles was fired, HR did a more thorough review of passenger complaints. They found a pattern dating back almost 2 years, mostly involving women of color with first-class tickets. It wasn't just you and those other 2 women who came forward. There were at least 11 incidents that had been reported but never properly addressed. The revelation sent a shiver down Tanya's spine. 11 known incidents. How many more had gone unreported because passengers didn't have the support she'd had? Witnesses, recordings, people willing to speak up? Thank you for telling me, Beverly. No, thank you for not letting it go, Beverly replied. Things are really changing around here, and it's because you decided to stand up. After they hung up, Tanya sat quietly in her car, processing everything. When she saw Zoe skipping out of school, her rainbow backpack bouncing, Tanya felt a surge of emotion. This was why she'd pushed for real change rather than accepting compensation, so that her daughter would grow up in a world where standing up against injustice wasn't just encouraged, but actually made a difference. How was your day, Mom? Zoe asked as she climbed into the car. It was a good day, sweetie, Tanya replied, smiling at her daughter in the rearview mirror. I think I helped make some important changes today. Like when you talked to the principal at my school about getting more library books with kids that look like me. Exactly like that, Tanya said, surprised and touched that Zoe had made the connection. As they drove home, Zoe chattering about her day, Tanya felt a deep sense of peace. The incident at the airport had been painful, but the outcome, real, meaningful change that would help countless future travelers, was worth every difficult moment. She hadn't just stood up for herself and Zoe, she'd stood up for everyone who might have faced similar treatment without the resources or support to fight back. Sometimes the most important victories weren't just about what you gained for yourself, but what you changed for others. And that was a lesson worth teaching her. Daughter, one brave step at a time.